You're listening to the Thriving Neighborhoods podcast, where systems thinking meets lived experience in the work of community transformation. I'm Kirk Wester-Rivera.
And I'm Markos Wester-Rivera.
Co-founders of Cerca Solutions, a consulting and advising company dedicated to helping social impact and community development organizations drive to greater impact. Every episode, we explore practical solutions for creating inclusively grown neighborhoods, covering housing, education, economic opportunity, community leadership, and more. Through conversations with expert practitioners and insights from decades in the field, we unpack what holistic neighborhood development actually looks like on the ground. All right, Markos, here it is. This is it. We've been working on this for quite some time and thinking about this podcast for many months, and I'm glad we're finally here, man. How are you feeling today?
Yeah. Good. How are you?
Doing well. Listen, I think we deserve an explanation as to why we're launching a podcast. As we've kind of gone through this work over the last couple of years, over and over again, we've heard just how much people value some of the articles we've been putting out on LinkedIn and how much folks just enjoy some of the thought partnership that we've been able to provide through Cerca Solutions. And so today we thought we'd just add to that sense of content and the ability to get people to think more about their communities and to hopefully, as we go through here, have some interviews with people that are leaders in this field, but also just leaning into the experiences that I've had as a practitioner in this space, trying to lead neighborhood change efforts. And Markos, you'll learn more about his story here in a moment too, but just living and growing up in these communities and understanding and being part of just his lived experience and seeing this change happen. But man, we're here. So it should, and I know it's been a long journey. I'm excited about it. Appreciative of Jesse at Rant 9 Productions helping us get this going. And certainly you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, so this first episode, we thought we'd just, center on talking a little bit about our stories. I mean, I think the question really is where do we come from? What's our perspective? And we feel like this would just be a good place to start as we begin to outline this series. Over the course of the next several months, we're going to play out a series, and we'll outline that as more to come with some great content and some great interviews. But first, we just kind of thought we'd talk a little bit about what got us into this work and kind of what brings us into our own experience. And I'll just get us kicked off, Markos. How's that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So first of all, I'd say this really all started way back as late as 1998, and my wife and I were just wrapping up college and trying to figure out like how we wanted to make an impact in the world. My wife was finishing up her education degree. And I was finishing up my degree in social work, and we just decided that the best way to make an impact in the world was to dive in with both feet in a neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we knew we had been suffering from decades of disinvestment. And coincidentally, my wife was offered an opportunity to teach at a new school that the community had advocated for to be built. And we just kind of dove in with both feet. And this is way before I should share, I guess, from the outset, an important note that you probably noticed that Markos and I have both the same last name. And Markos, that's probably important to mention. So Markos is actually my son. And and one of the things that we decided to do in starting Cerca Solutions, we decided to start this together. And the reason for that we'll talk about in a little while, but yeah, I forgot about that in the initial introduction. But as my wife and I were kind of going into this space, we really had the wonderful opportunity to settle into a majority immigrant neighborhood in Tulsa, and from there, just trying to really figure out how to make an impact, and started volunteering for some nonprofits. But it ultimately started with something super simple. And Markos, I know you'd appreciate this because this was an important part of your life. But in our house, we love the game of football, and I should preface that by it's the game of football that the rest of the world plays, not the one that we play here in the U.S. But But yeah,
The
just
one where you
started
use your
going.
foot.
That's right. The one that you actually use your foot. But we actually started, I actually started by just going to the park and practicing kicking the soccer ball up against the wall and hanging out there. I'd show up every day, every Sunday at 2:00. And before I knew it, some of my wife's students would come by and we'd start kicking the ball around. And, fast forward a couple months, it turned into a pickup game every Sunday at 2:00 out in the neighborhood park. And I should mention that this park was nothing spectacular. In fact, rarely was the grass mowed and maintained. So we were regularly trying to deal with that. But that just led to, over the course of 2 years, just being consistent, just showing up, just going out there every Sunday. Before you knew it, we had, probably 24 kids and another dozen adults and typically dads out there. And then their moms and sisters would come out and just start, walking around the park. And it just really struck me as how we create the sense of community. And at the time, my background was as a psychotherapist. I was actually working as a bilingual therapist within my neighborhood at the school, actually, that my wife was working at, and started to really understand and see the dramatic needs for healthcare and what folks had to go to just to see a doctor in our neighborhood. In fact, at the time, there was only one. For those of you that are in the community development space, you'd know what I'm talking about. There's only one, what they call Federally Qualified Health Center, FQHC. And so we started really gathering a bunch of our neighbors and asking the question of like, what are some of their needs? And so my wife and I, along with 6 others, started a nonprofit clinic in our neighborhood, and 10 years later, opened grounds on a top-notch, top state-of-the-art, fully functioning healthcare center called Community Health Connection. And then from there, and Markos will share a little bit about this in his experience. He has a ton of experience with Community Health Connection over 10 years. Just diving in, we started to ask the question of our neighbors, what do we want to see here? And I just remember, leveraging just the network that we had really created through my wife being a teacher at that time, year after year after year, and us being very involved in their lives, and me being a therapist at the school. We just started to see, realize that we had a lot of people that we knew and were connected with in this neighborhood. And so out of that, just started asking some of our friends to host coffee visits to their homes, where they would then bring together a handful of their friends and neighbors to ask the question of what do we want to see. For at that time, even though our neighborhood had seen some serious community activism, in fact, it was the first small area plan ever created for the city. What we saw was, and this pattern, by the way, we had found would repeat itself over and over again over the decades, but we found that small area plan called for a new school, and it called for a renewing of the shopping district that was there. But the city's response was, the city and the school system's response was, well, we built a school, we created a post office, which subsequently closed about 6 years later. We created a new parking lot for the business area. We're all done. And I look at the plan and I'm like, this is far from done. And so we started really talking with our neighbors and asking the question of like, what is next? What is there for our neighborhood? And that takes us to about 2008. And at the time, there was a series of national initiatives called Promise and Choice Neighborhoods. And I was asked by a local foundation and a local nonprofit who were really thinking about these federal opportunities to help advance neighborhood development. And I was asked to help kind of lead some community organizing efforts to really ensure that the community helped create a vision for what they wanted to see in our neighborhood. And out of that, subsequently, that nonprofit and foundation was successful in moving these big grant opportunities forward. And so subsequently was asked if I would work with our community to develop a new organization. And so out of that came an organization that is fully dedicated to fulfilling the vision of that neighborhood. And later that kind of type of organization would be known as a community quarterback. We didn't have that terminology at the time, but in that kind of community, I'm not even sure the community quarterback term really embodies it. The way I saw it is it's more like a general contractor. The way I often share like what the work of that organization would do would be to essentially take the vision of the community, similar to like if you're going to remodel your home, you wouldn't necessarily just hire a bunch of subcontractors and say, hey, here's my vision, and then come back and hope and pray 6 months later that your vision became a reality. But what I would say is that instead you would hire a general contractor whose job it is to make sure that vision becomes a reality, and that as there are hiccups along the way or questions that need to be answered, that they would come back to the homeowner. In this case, the homeowner is the community, and to say like the original vision wasn't possible. And so out of that, drove forward a good 13 years, really joined the Purpose-Built Communities Network. It's a nationwide network around advancing 4 pillars around high quality education pipeline that serves the community, mixed income housing at scale, inclusive economic growth, and community health and wellness. And those were kind of the 4 pillars that we, along with our community, really built on, and ultimately created Tulsa's only inclusively grown neighborhood in 2 decades. And what our data showed was it was the only neighborhood in the city that had grown at a faster rate than the rest of the city average. And it was the only one. There's 3 of them in the city at that time when we measured it in 2020, but it was the only one of those 3 that seemed to be primarily driving wealth for the families and community that was there all along. So that's really kind of, a background of leading an organization that led to 600 plus units of housing, over $200 million of investment. 50 of that was in the school system. Our local high school went from the second highest dropout rate to the second highest graduation rate within that 10-year period of time. And we really saw dramatic change. And so in 2023, as a family, for a whole host of reasons, felt like it was time for us to move to Colorado. And so since then, out of that, we decided to leverage that 25 plus years of almost 30 years of experience to develop Cerca Solutions. And that's where I'd like Markos, you go ahead and share your story and kind of pigtail off of that, because I'm sure that a lot of what I just shared, resonates personally for you as well as I'm sure you've got a lot of filter a lot of added content to really share on top of that. I'd love to hear your experience and how you experienced that time. Was it a disaster or was it awesome?
I don't think it was a complete disaster.
Hey, jury's still out. Jury's still out.
I think a lot of my experience just growing up in this neighborhood was being able to see both sides of the same coin, right? Being able to see kind of the work that's going into a lot of the different initiatives, whether it's through growing together or whether it's through, the city of Tulsa or even grassroots organizations, stuff like that. And then being able to see like the impact it had on, my neighbors, my friends, my babysitters, whoever it is. And really see like whether it's a small thing of just a small improvement of like, oh, this helps me out in my day to day, or if it's a big thing like suddenly we have a fresh new park for everybody to attend and play those same soccer games that you were talking about earlier. And that was, I think, one of the big things that I've noticed that and it's an experience not everybody had growing up, of being able to really understand fundamentally what needs people have and what needs to be done to fulfill those. And so growing up,
I imagine you saw firsthand kind of the, what the workload is in terms of what our community really had to pull together. And I know as part of just your life growing up, but I imagine, there are some pretty interesting questions that were raised in your mind as you kind of went to school or went and engaged other people.
A whole lot of volunteer hours that were fulfilled.
Some folks would call that as voluntold, but I'm appreciative that you call them volunteers. So,
but yeah, I mean, I think one of the big eye-opening experiences for me was in high school. I had helped with several different school board campaigns, one of which was my mom's school board campaign. And she was able to become the first Latina school board member, thankfully, in a predominantly Latino school district, which is kind of insane that it's took so long to get there, but we're there, and the impacts it's had on, after that, and all the people who've taken her role afterwards have been absolutely amazing, and it's opened a lot of opportunities for people who, didn't think that was even possible before. But I think one of the big in helping doing that kind of door-to-door campaigns, it was a very formative experience in that I got to understand why people believe the things they do and why people want the things they do. And it's what would later lead me to go study political science and GIS later on. But on top of that, just seeing, whether it's the impacts of COVID on our immigrant neighbors and our immigrant families in our community, or how the different presidential administrations have had on those same families, the different impacts. Just being able to see how people adapt to that, I think, has been a very life-changing, life-forming experience. But overall, I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but overall, there were so many different experiences here and there that really led me to go to college in St. Louis University. So I studied political science, and urban poverty studies, and ArcGIS, and with the sole intention of wanting to figure out how do I help people that need it the most. I remember going into college having this kind of naive idea of I've seen the impact these neighborhood organizations can have on just a small neighborhood. What if I could just do that for everybody? That's why I wanted to study political science initially. I was like, let's just do it. Let's just help everybody out. And I think over the years, I realized, that's not really how the world works. And through starting Cerca Solutions and through working in these different communities across the country, I've really gotten the opportunity to learn of what does it take from an organizational level? Because a lot of what I saw growing up was just people
just rolling up your sleeves and working.
doing the hard work of it. I don't know if I ever saw, or at least I didn't really understand the strategy behind it though. And I think that's something that now I'm starting to understand more and more. And I think that's something that I have a huge appreciation for now, how does this all come together, right?
One of the kind of fun facts that I often share about your life is that you attended every single board meeting of our Community Health Connection Federally Qualified Health Center for 10 years, the first 10 years of your life, because we started that clinic the year you were born. And I think if I recall, you missed one meeting, and that was because you were sick. And I didn't want to get other folks sick because you'd attended before when you're sick. But I don't know how many people have 10 years worth of board of experience by the time they're 11. But certainly an interesting kind of fun fact. It was interesting because I one of our perspectives, and I think that it definitely influences our passion for this work, is I know that my wife and I, your mom and I, had really this we did not have everything that was necessary to raise a kid in this world with all of with all the experiences that they needed to have to be a successful kind of world citizen, so to speak. And I know that our perspective is to really take seriously kind of that adage of it takes a village to raise a child, but more importantly, that it takes really a community that's tied together. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of just about how deeply that reality, that kind of vision or that approach, was seated in your life, and just how your experience growing up is just, how you've seen it just being different than other kids.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something that I remember. It was a little bit of a culture shock whenever I would talk to like friends who lived in other parts of, like friends from school or church or whatever that lived in other parts of the city, whether it's like the more suburban areas or the more or just different neighborhoods that didn't have that same kind of almost like community backing of like, oh yeah, I go down the street, I know who lives in that house, I wave to them as I'm going to church or as I'm going to school, or that person over there was my babysitter like for the last 10 years or whatever it is. Or even I getting to know the people at our local panaderia or our local different or different stores.
Shout out to Cancun. I mean, excuse me, why did I say Cancun? Calaveras. Shout out to
Cancun is also
Cancun is
amazing.
Calaveras, Calaveras was the bomb for sure.
But I think one of the things I didn't really get when I would go hang out at a friend's house like in South Tulsa or something like that, it was like, what do you mean you don't know who lives across the street, or like you've never talked to them, or like you see them every day? What, like how does or not getting understanding, like you want to go outside and play, where are you going to play? There's no park over here, or the closest one, there's like no one there, whatever it is. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciated the most, was being able to like walk outside, even though at the same time the same people who didn't have those experiences often were there were several times where I would hear things of like, oh, I don't want to go to your house because that's the dangerous part of the city, or we can't do anything over there because that's where all the criminals live, or whatever it is, which to me was really disheartening, because from my perspective, it was like, I could do whatever I want. Like, I know everybody here, we'll all help each other out. There's this really, really strong sense of community that I feel like I was missing anytime I'd go anywhere else.
When you're touching on a key learning of mine, and as we kind of summarize this and wrap up here shortly, I'd say that I honestly came into this work coming from a kind of go change the world type of mentality. And what I am so thankful for is that exact attitude or approach or thinking mindset, however you want to call it, that you are sharing, that many of your friends from other parts of town often had, or their opinion or perspective they had about our neighborhood. I would be lying if I didn't say I had the same thoughts, right? Because you're kind of raised in this mentality of, it's like, that's them over there and that's the bad part of town or whatever. And honestly, my biggest surprise and realization that I found was that there was tremendous beauty, strength, just culture, connectedness, these things that just I never found in the community I grew up in. And it fundamentally changed who I am. And the other piece that we didn't share is right after you turned 1, we had the opportunity to adopt your oldest sister, who was turning 16. So we went from being the parents of a newborn to suddenly being the parents of a teenager. And she was a Mexican immigrant who was undocumented. And we went through, and I bring that up because we went through the dramatic and harrowing experience of getting her to a place of citizenship that maybe we'll share on a different episode, but was just blew my mind in terms of how complex it is. And, I think it was an experience that I wish most people understood. But I think the importance of that decision was that she played such an important role in fundamentally creating and investing in who you are today, who I am today. I remember very distinctly in 2007, Oklahoma saw fit to pass this really insane bill called House Bill 1804, which basically made it's still on the books today. It's a felony offense in the state of Oklahoma to knowingly house, provide transportation to provide assistance to, basically to be a human to somebody who they deem illegal. And so, we're sitting there with this wonderful individual in our house as potential felons. And yet, it'd be easy to frame that as some type of like heroic effort. But what I could say is that I remember the day that you came home, and you may not remember this because you're pretty young in 2007, but we had gone to a dear friend of ours' house and was talking to them about kind of how they were responding to this, and they were expressing just the concern and fear. And we talked about just what whether they had papers and what that meant and so on. And I remember when we came home, you asked me, what does that mean? And I, what does that mean to be undocumented? What does that mean not to have papers? And I explained that to you. And then you were in tears and talking about how not right that is. Like, why do they have to, and I'm not going to share their names, but why do they have to live in fear like that? Like, they are wonderful people. And I count that as a huge learning experience, that you're not going to get that sense of understanding from volunteering at the local homeless shelter, during the holidays. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a sense of like, these people matter. You understand why these people matter. And it gives you a sense of some of the injustices, but you also understood, like, how can this injustice be done to folks that have provided so much strength and beauty and joy in my life, right? And that, to me, is why we do this work, right? It's that sense of proximity and why proximity matters so deeply. And in fact, I should just say that's where the name Cerca Solutions comes from. I know you and I wanted it to. Cerca happens to be the Spanish word for closeness. Don't look it up because it also means the word for fence, but we'll leave that one aside. A lot of words have two different definitions, but it's that sense of proximity that led to the work. I'll just sum it up by kind of explaining a few of the other things that we were able to have deep experience in, and then we'll kind of close out. And the name of the organization that I worked for and founded in Tulsa was called Growing Together. I know, Markos, you mentioned that earlier, but I didn't provide context. And with Growing Together, not only did we serve as the community quarterback, really kind of leading and trying to create collective impact among dozens of partners within our neighborhood, organizing them in a way that really helped advance that community vision. But then we also opened up our own housing arm by creating the second only mixed income neighborhood trust in the country. We started a nonprofit bank called a CDFI, where we lent out several $1 million to Latino-owned small businesses and entrepreneurs within our community. We created a community leadership institute, which led to several people serving in office. And then we also operated the local communities and schools program, which really creates a whole host of wraparound or integrated student supports around each and every one of our students, and making sure that their social needs were not the major impediment to their learning. So I just say all that just to understand the breadth of experience, and we hope to really touch with many of the leaders in these spaces and have more voices in this over the coming months. But just to give you a little taste of what you should expect over the coming months, we've got a series that we're putting together for you, talking about why neighborhoods matter if we're concerned about alleviating the impacts of poverty, thinking about the history of poverty alleviation in the United States, thinking about the neuroscience of place, community invitation and leadership, the idea of what's happening and why we should be concerned and not so concerned about gentrification. asset-based community development, and then just the power of proximity. So there's a lot of topics coming up. I'm excited. Markos, this is coming to a close of our first ever podcast. And man, any closing remarks that you want to make, my friend?
Yeah, I think just about what you're just saying, I think, look, no shade to anybody who's volunteering at homeless shelters or donating to local food banks, but I think at the end of the day, yeah, we've done our fair share of that. It's great work, but I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to really talk about is how do we put pressure on not only the source or the how do we alleviate the source of these this pain in our communities, the source of these problems, but also how can we do it in a way that is a fully wraparound, fully inclusive of every single issue that's going on, whether it's housing, whether it can occasionally be like food insecurity, whether it's immigration issues within the neighborhood, whether anything. We want to make sure that we can help give you all the tools to fully aid your community and help lift your community up in the best way possible.
Well said. Well said. And for the most part too, we hope to bring in, that level of experience and hope that this becomes a place where you seek after to really help, spark that thinking. I mean, we really come from a diverse perspective of both lived experience and professional experience over 3 decades. And really trying to bring that perspective here so that it helps those that are listening really be more thoughtful and more intentional and more impactful. At the end of the day, our tagline is helping organizations drive to greater impact. And that's really what we intend to do with this. So thank you for listening. Thriving Neighborhoods podcast. If today's conversation sparks something for you, we'd love to hear about it. Connect with us on LinkedIn or visit us at cerca.solutions, that's cerca.solutions, to learn more about how we support community quarterbacks and organizations committed to high impact efforts. And if you found value in this episode, please share it with someone else working towards thriving communities. Every conversation moves us closer to the change we need. Thanks for listening. I'm Kirk Wester-Rivera.
And I'm Markos Wester-Rivera.
And this has been the Thriving Neighborhoods podcast. We'll see you next time.